It's the first chill of November, when the jack-o'-lanterns start to slump and rot, and the wind blows straight to your bones. But horror does not pack up after Halloween, my spookies. It lingers. This Week in Horror History gave us a monster born from fire and fallout, a prom night turned psychic bloodbath, sunglasses that see the rot in civilization, a devilish bargain on primetime TV, and a handheld trip back to Silent Hill you could play safely under the covers. We'll sprint through 5 moment makers, then dig into a razor-sharp deep cut that wears its bayonet like a boutonniere. Beastly birthdays, a then and now kerfuffle, and of course a killer recommendation to turn your streaming into screaming. You're listening to This Week in Horror History. Let's haunt that calendar. I'm Enrique Couto, filmmaker, horror lifer, and the guy who keeps the jack-o'-lantern lit all year long. Here to bring you the most interesting elements of horror news that took place between November 3rd and November 9th. On deck for tonight, Gojira stomps into Japanese theaters. Carrie opens and rewrites High School Hell. John Carpenter's They Live drops the most satisfying alley fight of the 1980s. The Twilight Zone tempts fate with a Mephistophelian contract. Try saying that 5 times fast. And Silent Hill Origins drags our nerves into the fog. And make sure you stick around after the break as we descend on a deep-cut slasher film with jaw-dropping practical gore. Then celebrate icons' birthdays and unpack a 1984 controversy, which is headed right back into theaters this December. So let's take a stab at the first one. I have to say this is a very fitting first piece of horror history because of my personal history with the series and my favorite gigantic lizard. On November 3rd, 1954, Gojira, also known as Godzilla, arrives in major Japanese cities, but not the way you might be thinking. Quick side note, because I am a Godzilla nerd, that famous roar is actually created by taking a bow and playing the bottom strings of an upright bass below the bridge. That's what makes that sound that is so unbelievably iconic. Toho's Atomic Nightmare doesn't just flatten buildings. It births the kaiju genre as a cinematic language for grief and, of course, post-war anxiety. Early rollouts began October 27th, but major city playdates hit on November 3rd, turning a man in a suit into a global metaphor that still roars. Okay, one more. And here's a fun fact. The United States cut, known as Godzilla, King of the Monsters from 1956, added Raymond Burr as a reporter, threading through the devastation. It also gave the film a bit more of a Western-style narrative, which they hoped would help American audiences connect with the material. And they were very, very right as Godzilla became a massive hit worldwide. As far as where to find Godzilla, King of the Monsters, or the original version, Gojira, which I think they're both pretty great in their own rights, you can stream it on the Criterion Collection. That's the best place to get the Japanese cut in all of its glory, and restored fully. Or you can get it on physical media if you're a nerd like me. November 3rd, 1976. Carrie opens regionally in the United States. Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's debut novel sneaks into theaters in the DC-Baltimore market on November 3rd and expands mid-month, becoming an absolute phenomena, Powered by Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie's Oscar-nominated turns, it's the prom everyone remembers for the worst reasons. Although my prom wasn't much better, if I'm honest. Fun fact, though, the release pattern started small with just 17 screens before catching fire in New York and Los Angeles weeks later. And from there, well, the rest is horror history. And if you've never seen Carrie before, or you want to brush up on your Brian De Palma Stephen King education, it's pretty easy to watch right now. You can catch it on Pluto TV and the Roku channel, completely for free. And of course, you can rent it on any major digital platform. And there is a beautiful 4K restoration available, which I enjoy quite a bit, again, because horror nerd. November 4th, 1988, They Live hits theaters at number 1 in the box office. I've been a massive fan of They Live since my teen years, I think, because the star, Rowdy Roddy Piper, is, well, one of my all-time heroes. I'm surprised I didn't know that. I actually double-checked, triple-checked to make sure it hit theaters at number 1. John Carpenter's sci-fi horror satire lands like a steel chair to the face, with Rowdy Roddy Piper versus consumerist overlords you can only spot while wearing magical sunglasses, although it's really more of a scientific thing. But, why quibble? Opened on November 4th and debuting at number 1, the obey/consume iconography escaped the screen and colonized popular culture. And here's a fun fact for you. That 6-minute alley fight between Keith David and Rowdy Roddy Piper, it's the stuff of pure legend. But oddly, it's kind of tender in its stubbornness. As far as where to check out They Live, I cannot recommend enough the Scream Factory 4K and Blu-ray release if you're a physical media nerd. But otherwise, if you want to see it on streaming, you'll have to rent it, as of the recording of this, on somewhere like Amazon Prime or Fandango at Home or Apple TV. November 6th, 1959. The Twilight Zone episode Escape Clause airs on TV. Rod Serling writes a devil's bargain parable with David Wayne as a hypochondriac who trades his soul for immortality and insurance fraud hijinks, because that's just the kind of guy Rod Serling was. Big fan of his sardonic wit and his ability to see the bizarre in the ordinary and the ordinary in the bizarre. It aired November 6th and still plays like a clever morality boomerang. Immortality without meaning is its own punishment. And here's a fun fact on that one. The vintage promos teased the episode as a Faustian bargain, yet somehow that did not spoil it for the viewers, because it's become one of the legendary episodes of a very legendary TV show. And as far as where to find it and watch it, well, that's pretty easy. It's streaming on Paramount Plus, and you can also find it for free on Pluto, or you can buy a Blu-ray box set if you want to try to hold your nerd up to me and have a showdown. And I want to take a quick second to say a big thank you to our sponsor on this inaugural episode of This Week in Horror History, Savorista, a coffee company that provides high quality and very, very delicious coffee blends that have all the bold flavor you've come to love, but they come in decaf and half-calf, so you can enjoy the premium coffee experience, but be confident that only the terrifying stories you're listening to or watching on your television screen are why you can't fall asleep. Head to Savorista.com and use promo code SPOOKY at checkout and get 25% off your order. And every order supports the show directly. Huge thank you to Savorista for sponsoring the inaugural episode of This Week in Horror History. November 6th, 2007. Silent Hill Origins releases for PSP, a nerve-scraping prequel that brought classic Silent Hill dread to handheld. Radios hiss, sirens scream, rust peels from reality. Origins launched November 6th with Akira Yamaoka's soundscapes and design work from Sam Barlow. Fun fact, the project course-corrected mid-development to lean hard into a more series-consistent atmosphere. As far as where to play, well, you can play it on PSP UMD, there are PlayStation 2 ports that exist, and digital availability varies by your region. When we return, a deep-cut slasher with bayonets, pitchforks, and Tom Savini splatter that made 80s gore fans swoon. All right, my spookies. Let's unmask an unsung killer in khaki. 1981's The Prowler. If the Golden Age slasher wave had a museum wing labeled Steel Cold Craftsmanship, The Prowler would sit in the center, his blade polished and his boots muddy. Directed by Joseph Zito, who would later helm Friday the 13th, the final chapter, as well as one of my personal favorites, Body Snatchers from 1993. This 1981 shocker unfurls in a small town, haunted by a wartime tragedy and an annual dance that should have stayed canceled. On November 6, 1981, the film opened theatrically in the United States, slipping into the post-Halloween corridor like a quiet intruder, although with very loud kills. The film's reputation rests in many ways on special effects legend Tom Savini's practical effects, vicious, unflinching, and disturbingly tactile. There's a famous bayonet set piece that's become a calling card for why practical effects and analog gore still curdle the stomach more than pixels ever could. Savini's work here sits alongside his work in Maniac and The Burning as a trilogy of "how did they do that" moments. Initially a modest performer, The Prowler grew into a cult favorite, often ranked among the subgenre's sharpest. Pun intended. It was even featured in the original Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs marathon. When the world's foremost drive-in movie critic shows your film, well, that means you did something very right. It's the kind of film you want to bring to a friend who says they've seen all the slasher movies, but that's not really the case until you've experienced this film's very mean streak. Critics today cite its atmosphere and deadly efficiency as quintessential early 80s slasher DNA. One of my favorite scenes is a very tense cat and mouse through a dormitory stairwell. It wrings suspense out of every creak, every shadow. You'll hold your breath at how long Joseph Zito lingers before the strike. The patience turns the blade. You can watch it right now for free streaming on Tubi TV, or rent it on Amazon Prime, Fandango at home, or you can watch it included with your AMC Plus subscription. If you love the grounded procedural dread of My Bloody Valentine from 1981, or the seaside paranoia of Dead and Buried from the same year, this one scratches the same itch without stealing their faces. That's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing to do. An unsung November chill that still numbs the fingers. Put it on late, lights low, and let the quiet stalk you. Slowly. We've talked a lot about death and mayhem, but now, let's celebrate some births, shall we? First up, ironically enough, is Tom Savini, born November 3rd, 1946. We just talked all about his work in The Prowler, Other films worth mentioning are Dawn of the Dead 1978, which is my personal favorite film, Day of the Dead 1985, and of course he directed the remake of Night of the Living Dead from 1990, which just came out on 4K. So if you're a movie collector like me, well, you really want to check that one out. And here's an interesting tidbit. His combat photography past in the Vietnam War informed a realism that helped change splatter films forever. Next up is Famke Janssen. I believe I'm saying that right. Born November 5th, 1964. One of her biggest credits in horror is The Faculty from 1998, directed by Robert Rodriguez, as well as appearing in Eli Roth's Hemlock Grove TV series. And here's a little nugget of trivia. She studied literature at Columbia before stepping into genre royalty. November 8th, 1847, was the birth of Bram Stoker. That's right, the man behind Dracula in 1897, the book that spawned hundreds upon hundreds of films, books, stage shows, podcasts, you name it. A curious tidbit about Bram: he took a lot of research trips to Whitby and dipped his toe in the theater life at the Lyceum. Many believe this helped steep his novel in stagecraft and superstition. And finally, born November 8th, 1968, is Parker Posey. She's done so many things, but in horror, she's most known for Scream 3 in 2000, and the more recent and very polarizing Beau is Afraid by Ari Aster from 2023. Many consider her to be a queen of the indie film scene, and she always manages to bring a sly menace to her horror-adjacent roles. If you want to see a movie that's truly terrifying but not at all a horror movie that stars Parker Posey, check out The House of Yes. Trust me, you won't thank me. It's a really good movie though, but it messed me up. On November 9th, 1984, a slasher dressed as Santa Claus opens the same day as A Nightmare on Elm Street and steals the outraged thunder. This is Silent Night, Deadly Night from 1984, and parents groups protested at malls and theaters. TV spots got pulled within 6 days, and TriStar, the film's distributor, yanked the movie despite a very solid start at the box office. In fact, it's worth noting, on opening weekend, Silent Night, Deadly Night actually outgrossed A Nightmare on Elm Street. Santa beat Freddy, which is interesting because he does know when you're sleeping. But that box office lead was crushed by the film being pulled. Now, decades later, the movie's a cult Christmas staple and one of my personal favorites. You can hear an entire episode about it on Cutting Deep into Horror if you just search at WeeklySpooky.com. It's been reevaluated as a seasonal shocker and case study in moral panic. And on December 12th of this year, 2025, a remake of Silent Night, Deadly Night will be released into theaters nationwide through Cineverse, the company that helped make Art the Clown of Terrifier fame famous in the cinema. I'll certainly be grabbing myself a ticket. Ho ho ho. Now, before I get out of here, I want to leave you with a little recommendation, something you can kick back with and watch while you're enjoying your November nights. I caught this one in the theater when it came out, and I really enjoyed it. It's 2019's Dr. Sleep. If you've avoided it because of sequel fear, well, consider this gentle push down the eerie hallway. Mike Flanagan's Dr. Sleep threads the needle between King's novel and Kubrick's film version of The Shining, delivering a sober and very mature ghost story about recovery, found family, and predation. It originally released on November 8th, 2019 in the United States, and it's a chilly companion for early November nights. Rebecca Ferguson's Rose the Hat is an instantly iconic predator, and the director's cut deepens character beats without sanding off all the sharp corners. It's best paired with a rewatch of The Shining and a cup of something warm while the wind rattles your windows. Maybe head over to Savorista.com and use your promo code SPOOKY at checkout. Get 25% off that magic hot brown. Dr. Sleep is currently available on Netflix, or you can rent it on Amazon Prime, Fandango at Home, and Apple TV. That's it for This Week in Horror History for November 3rd through the 9th. If you enjoyed this new program here at Weekly Spooky, let me know. Send me an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com, and make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, because we'll be back next Tuesday with more horror and history. I've been Enrique Couto. I'll see you tomorrow on Weekly Spooky.